here. But what I'm going to cover today is basically how I utilize a facial scan. Sorry, I need to silence this phone too. I wish a few more things would go wrong as I'm trying to do this. Uh, all right, so this is what I'm going to be covering. This was a lady that we did some digital dentures on. We actually did a lot of stuff on her, but I'm going to show how I'd use it in, let's say, just digital dentures and utilize facial scans plus facial pictures with a simulation software so that we can really know exactly where to put those teeth and get great results, 99% of the time, your first try. And so, real quick before I jump into that, I'll mention again the upcoming courses that we've got. We do have a digital denture course this weekend that's going to be covering all of this stuff in huge detail, and it's facially driven digital dentures, right? So anyone can set some digital denture teeth and print it, right? But how do you know where the teeth belong? How do you figure all that out? And how do you do it in an expedited manner where you don't have to do a bunch of try-ins and stuff? Like, we want to just nail that the first time. And so this lady that I'm going to be showing you today, that was a 2 appointment denture essentially. We've also got exocad, guided surgery, full arch, photogrammetry with iMetric, full mouth rehab, and then guided surgery level 2 coming up again. We just finished a level 2 course 2 weeks ago. So anyway, we'd love to have you if you're interested. We do all of our courses both in person and virtual options. So if due to COVID or travel restrictions or just your schedule, if you're unable to join us in person, you'll get the entire course essentially just through Zoom. You still ask questions, you can still interact, and then plus we'll give you all the same files. And something that we do with all of our courses that I'm not aware of anyone else that does this, but we record the entire course and make that available to all of our attendees, whether in person and virtual. Because I don't know about you, but when I do courses like this, there's so dang much to absorb that I only end up picking up about 20% of it while I'm there. And then I get home, and if I don't have something to reference, I'm just kind of stuck, right? So having that content where you can go back, rewatch it, review, go back and practice the same cases and stuff, to me, that's incredibly helpful. And again, that's just a value added thing we try to do with all of our courses that frankly, I think makes them worth a lot more than what we're charging because consider this, I mean, if you're taking a digital denture course, part of the battle is getting your staff trained. So yeah, I think it would be most ideal to bring those staff members, but even if you don't, you can actually go back home and you've got the content for your staff to watch and then practice on the same files, right? So a lot of value there. We'd love to see if you're able to come this weekend. All of our courses are listed here at transcendde.com under courses. And basically, we're pretty much running those 5 courses on repeat. Those seem to be the most popular ones for us. So with that, let's jump into our case here. All right, so this lady, the way we got connected was she had posted a video on TikTok. I don't know what it was, probably, picture of a dog or something, who knows. But what ended up happening is that everyone piled on and began really making fun of her, harassing her, bullying her about the state of her teeth, which is awful. I hate, that's one of the most awful things about the digital media landscape is that so much of that goes on. But nonetheless, it did. Well, this dentist who we didn't know actually contacted her and said, hey, I'd love to help you get your smile back. He began talking to her, and it turned out she lives in Huntsville, Alabama. He's across the country. So he heard about us and our kind of charitable clinic and asked if we would be willing to maybe take it on. And so we said, sure, let's get her in, do it. And we ended up doing the works on her. So she's going to have the last laugh at all these people who are making fun of her because she's going to get a $60,000 smile for free. And it's, I'm glad to be able to help out someone that, has kind of had a raw deal of it. So that's how we got connected with her. And then we got her in and gathered all the diagnostic data, right? So that was the first time we saw her. We're going to get a CT scan because we're going to do implant rehabs on her. So CT scan, intraoral scans of her teeth. Then facial pictures, to me, those are non-negotiable. I absolutely will not do a full mouth case or even an aesthetic case without good pictures. And I primarily want full face smiling, full face at repose, and then a lateral view of the same. Okay, and we'll go through how I utilize those. But for me, pictures are non-negotiable. And then we also did a facial scan using the Instarisa facial scanner. I think that adds a lot of value if you have it. It's not, I wouldn't consider it an essential because I can get to the same position and end result with just the 2D pictures, but perhaps not as consistently and not as easily. And we'll go through that, but the pictures, absolute must. You've got to have that because everything has to be treatment planned based on the aesthetics and what would the ideal smile look like. Well, if all you have is intraoral scans and a CT, then by the time that patient goes home, you have no idea about what their smile looks like. You're just looking at raw models. And so you've got to have the facial pictures. That I can't stress enough, that's a non-negotiable. So this is just that PowerPoint template that I've made previous videos about. If you want, go find that video. I think it's the Transcend Facial Analysis template or something like that. It's in my channel. And in the comments, there's actually where you can email and get this template, or you could make it yourself. It doesn't matter, but it's got a bunch of useful stuff in it. But one of the things is this slide. A vertical line, you're going to pull your picture in and align it behind that line so that it's going through the facial midline. Then it's got a perpendicular line, so this horizontal is what you would adjust up or down to go through her pupils. Actually, I should say leave the template lines where they are and then spin your picture around behind that until you align. So there's always a little flash point in the pupils. I'll just try to position the picture so that the line goes right through the same spot in both pupils. And then this is a duplicate of that line, which I can drag up or down, and it just gives me that interpupillary plane down here in reference to the teeth. And oftentimes I'll drag that down to where maybe I want to put an incisal edge. And then these two vertical lines, those are just what I'll adjust to the width of the nose, because what we all learned in dentures, right? The teeth should be chosen and scaled based on that patient's facial type. And one of the best estimates of that is just to make the width of the anterior six match the width of their nose. If you do that, it's by and large, it's going to be appropriate for that patient. Okay, so let me point out a few things I would take away from this picture. Okay, so for starters here, I'm looking and she's got a really, really large smile. Okay, so I like to think of the lips as a frame, and then everything within that frame is what I'm going to be able to do my simulation with. If I look at that frame and I gauge how much teeth they should be showing, I typically want to make the maxillary teeth showing in about 2/3 to 3/4 of the overall smile frame. Okay, so based on that, I'm looking at hers and she's about 3/4, maybe a hair more. Perhaps we could bring up her incisal edge just a little bit. I'm also taking away from this that her facial midline is off with her dental midline, so we can easily correct that. And then I'm also looking at her canines, and those seem to maybe be a hair long. So maybe bring all those up just a little bit, but we're going to pretty closely match her incisal position. Okay, so that's a lot of information that we gained, because again, if I can figure out where central incisor goes, everything else falls into place. The rest of it becomes a piece of cake. All right, so the next picture would be this lateral view, and same thing, I'll align the picture until this horizontal line is going through tragus of the ear, ala of the nose. Right, that's going to be generally parallel to the occlusal plane, so we've got a duplicate of that a little lower. And if I'm looking here, I can see again that based on that incisal position, I think these canines are too far down. So that's further information that I took from the previous picture. I'm also going to look here at the wet dry line of the lip. So that's about right here, and that incisal edge should be touching right on that. You know, if you think about saying 55 or any of your frictive sounds, the incisal edge should touch right there on the wet dry line of the lip. So if anything, hers could maybe come back just a bit, but no major changes there. And then a picture of their smile a picture of lips at repose, but with them apart. Because what I'm looking for here is to reference where their existing incisal edge is at repose. So she's a young lady in her 20s. She shows quite a bit at repose. And so this is probably, I would say, probably appropriate for her smile. We just obviously need to fill in the gaps here. Now, if let's say that if you look at this patient and it's a 70-year-old man, right, and maybe they've got their lips apart, but you can't see any incisors at rest. Okay, well, clearly you need to add some, but how much? You can't tell that from the picture if it's not showing. So the only change I would make on this picture, if they don't show anything at rest, is either you or your assistant slide a perio probe under that lip and take the tip right to the incisal edge. Now you have something to gauge a measurement so that if they're not showing anything, you would know now how much needs to be added to get it dead even with their lip. And then I'm just kind of determining how much incisal show do they need at rest. So I've got a slide on this, but I don't have it handy. But going from memory, on average, the 16-year-old female will show about 4.5 millimeters of incisors at rest. By the age of 50, that has dropped to like 1.5 to 2 millimeters of incisal show at rest. Okay, so that gives you a really great some set of guidelines that you can now position teeth so that they're age appropriate. Or maybe if you want a little more youthful smile, you add a little. Men is going to be similar principles, but they're going to, on those averages, be about 1 millimeter less. So the average 16-year-old male is around 3-ish millimeters of show at rest. By age 50, they're at 0 to 1. All right, so maybe if you're dealing with a 70-year-old guy and you want to give him a youthful smile, maybe you give him 2 millimeters of incisal show at rest. Okay, so pretty easy to gauge that. And then we'll often take this, but I find this picture more useful for just overall treatment planning, not so much smile design, because you can't tell much about the smile here. It can be useful for aligning 3D models behind it, like in exocad or Blue Sky Plan. But again, that's something I'm usually using this more in treatment planning and patient presentation than I would for the actual smile design. All right, I'll take a face bow, which for us, instead of an ear bow, we use that Cois dentofacial analyzer because it'll accomplish the same thing, but more. Okay, so ear bow, that's going to put your maxillary cast in the right position relative to the joint, but we don't necessarily gain a lot of aesthetic information. Whereas with this, it also puts it in the right position to the joint, but you've got this, which you align to the midline of the face, this, which you align to the interpupillary line, and then just like a fox plane, you have this, which aligns to the ala tragus. So now, when I take this plate off and mount these casts, then not only am I in the right position relative to the joint, approximately, but I also know when I'm looking at that cast on the articulator, here is the facial midline. All right, I don't have to necessarily have the patient in front of me. I know that the occlusal plane, once this is mounted up, should be parallel to the floor. It makes it very easy to now know where to set teeth, okay? And then beyond that, I've digitized all the components of the Panadent articulator as well as the Cois facial analyzer. So I might not ever mount these casts up, but what I can do is I can scan this record and then stitch it in, and now I've got it on a virtual articulator, and I can know all the same information on facial planes and aesthetics and all that. So, we'll talk again about the facial scanners, and I think those are very valuable to use, but if you don't have that, the next best thing to me is this Cois facial analyzer record, because it gives me all the same information. It's just maybe not quite as streamlined as having the facial scan. All right, so let's talk about how we would now figure out how to design the smile. For me, it starts with a 2D simulation. Could you do it without this and maybe go straight to a wax up? Well, if you're a good technician, then probably yes. But to me, it's a lot easier to first of all figure out a 2D simulation that looks great for that patient, and then come back and try to replicate that in my 3D wax up. Because if I'm looking at a smile like this, boy, there's so many directions I could go. I just am not really sure what I need to be shooting for. So going back to that facial analysis template I was talking about, I show in that video how you can use PowerPoint to do a 2D simulation, but it's not the most streamlined method. It's kind of a hack of that software, whereas the software I'm currently using for this is this DTS Pro, which is really, really great, and I highly recommend anyone get this because there's no question it'll pay for itself very quickly. But it allows you to do a 2D simulation in under a minute or two. It's easy enough that you could train any staff to do this, and it's so quick you could do it chair side. So, man, if I was still practicing, every single new patient, and then every patient that's remotely interested in aesthetic work or comprehensive dentistry, I would sit there and do a simulation with them, because what happens is when they see what could be accomplished in their own face, I mean, you don't have to sell the case anymore. The case will sell itself. They will find the money and want to move forward with treatment. You just got to make sure that your simulation is within the realm of possibility. You know, if you, for example here, let's say if she still had all her teeth, you know, that midline was off by 4 millimeters. So if I give a simulation where it's got this picture perfect midline, you know, I can't accomplish that in reality unless we maybe do a long time of ortho. So it needs to be something that's possible. Now, in the case of dentures or an implant full mouth rehab, you know, you've got a blank slate, so anything's possible. You can throw whatever in there. So I'll do a live demo of this in a moment, just to show you the big picture. You'll be able to pull the picture in, outline the frame of the smile, cut that out, and then begin swapping in various smiles or individual teeth. Based on the facial analysis and everything, you can get a nice simulation like this, and that again is a 1 to 2 minute job. You can print out these simulation cards and send to them, or send them the file, but it's just really valuable. And I'll even say this is not one of the best simulations out of this software, because she has such a huge smile that it's a little more inclined to kind of give it away that it might be fake, but it still looks darn good, I think. And for most people, the simulations I'd get, I would say, are photorealistic. You can't hardly tell that it's not their real smile. So let me show you that software real quick. I'm going to go ahead and launch this DTS Pro app. Now this app is it's a subscription-based app, and you can download it, and then I want to say it's a couple $100 a year, which, my goodness, if you can't recoup that within 2 weeks of having this app, I don't know what you're doing with it, because it should just make cases sell like crazy. So what I'll do is I'm going to choose an extraoral image, and I'm going to pull in this facial picture and click next. And what it's going to do is now analyze the face, and it's got some AI functions built into it. So now my glasses here are covering up her pupils, but what it would normally do is go ahead and align the facial planes to midline and her pupils. It won't be able to do that with my glasses covering that. But then it'll also go ahead and outline the patient's smile. All right, and as you see right here, when I click next, this is about dead on. Now I could tweak any of these nodes if I needed to, but as you can see, that did a really nice job. Okay, so I'll click accept on that, and since it didn't automatically align it, since I had these glasses on, I would be now putting each of these dots right in the middle of her pupil. Okay, same spot on both sides, and that will result in figuring out all these facial planes. Okay, so again, I'm just manually doing this, and about right there I think is good enough. Click next, and now you can begin doing whatever you want. So like, let's say they have a nice smile, but you just wanted to maybe show what whitening would look like. Well, you can do just whitening. Let's say if they've got one missing tooth, you know, you might be able to just outline their existing tooth and mirror that into the position. But by and large, what I'm using it for is for overall smile simulations. And I find this so useful because now it's very easy. You know, I'm going to now drag these down. And if you remember, I said that I approximately wanted to match, maybe a little shorter, her central, but that those canines I wanted to bring up. So I'm just superimposing this over her existing canines, and that puts the incisal edge right there. Let's maybe see what that would look like. Okay. So right away you've got a pretty darn good simulation. Now if I wanted to widen that, because I do notice her canines are pretty constricted. Remember that we talked earlier about the width of the nose being a good frame of reference for how wide the teeth should be scaled. So I'm going to just stretch this slightly until I'm at about the width of her nose with the distal of my canine. You see that? And going up here. All right. And right there you have a simulation that is very easy, and you can now print this out. And beyond that, you can now go through all of the various smile libraries that they have. So there's a lot of nice retracted pics in this, and we could switch through a bunch of different smiles with rounded teeth, squared teeth, whatever, and see what that patient likes. I mean, it's as quick as hitting that arrow, and you can now look at all these various smiles in that patient's mouth. Broad smiles, narrow smiles, whatever. It really is a cool software. So I kind of like this smile on her. I think I'm going to go with that one. And what we could do now is a preview. And the preview, you know, it is going to block out where it's kind of black under that. So normally it wouldn't be so abrupt, because most people, their smile comes right to that lower lip. Now there are libraries that include lower teeth, so you could use that if you want to. But what I find is a good middle ground is just to turn up the transparency just slightly like that, so that the lower teeth shine through a bit. And now I can do comparison smiles, right? I mean, any person in a dental practice should be able to do this and learn this really quickly. And then if you will start printing these pictures or emailing it to those patients, or at least the wives of the male patients, again, I think you'll be just astounded how many elective cases you end up doing, because this is just incredibly powerful to have looked at yourself in the mirror every day with a smile you hate, and then see a picture that looks photorealistic of yourself with an ideal smile. That's powerful. The only thing more powerful than that is an actual digital wax up where you transfer it into their mouth, and now they're literally holding a mirror, moving around, seeing what's possible. But that obviously is much more work. I would still do this to help myself generate that wax up, right? So really, really valuable. Now, I'll show also the alternative to doing just a whole smile like this is, instead we could come up here to veneers and crowns, and I could choose a library of teeth. So, you know, rectangular, square calm, all these. I'm going to choose this oval shaped tooth for her since she's feminine looking, and I'm going to drop those in. And now I'm going to again think about, okay, the midline was shifted over, so I'm going to put her midline about where the facial midline was. And then canine tips needed to come up, we said. So I'm going to bow those cusp tips upward. And obviously I've widened out her smile too to the width of her nose. I could probably come in just a little bit to right there. And very quickly we now have a tooth set up. Okay. Let's see, if I apply that, I could then even come in and, for example, she's a little canted to her right in the picture, so I don't think I need to go much farther back here, but I might make the teeth a bit taller because she does have such a broad smile line. And then same over here, and I might also add another tooth back here. So I could just right click this one and duplicate it, and then pull it over, and then tweak outlines and all that kind of stuff. All right, something like that. And now, with the tooth forms present, I could swap in various textures for these. Now, I know this doesn't look realistic yet, so bear with me. We could put in all kinds of textures. Okay, so I could swap in, say, this texture. And what I'm going to try to do is find one that appears to have the same level of exposure. This is a pretty overexposed photo here, so I might need to find a smile that's also pretty overexposed, like this one. And let's do a preview of this and see what that would look like. Alright, so it's decent, but I don't like how the gum tissue is behind that. And so if you've ever got a gummy or smile like this where you need to do this, you could come back under the texture and you can apply a gum tissue. Alright, and it'll take an actual picture's gum tissue and let you swap that in behind here. So I might go to right there and to right there. And then I really only need to go to about the contact point here. Okay, let's do another preview. Alright, that's looking better. I think I could still add more teeth back here and continue filling out the smile line. And again, we could come back in and we could add lower teeth. You can geek out as much as you want on this. I find for most scenarios, just doing the instant smiles is perfectly fine. I like this more whenever I've got existing teeth and we need to basically plan crown and bridge around those. Because now it's easier to pull an individual tooth template and superimpose it onto individual teeth. Okay, but if you've got a blank slate, just use the instant smiles. I think that's going to be your best bet, right? We could do this simulation here like this. So if you've done that, just start it playing, and whoever speaks next loses, right? Very valuable. All right, so let's go back to our instant smile from earlier, and let's just again do a preview of this. And I want to zoom in here and really gauge where I need to do these teeth in the wax up. All right. So turning the transparency down, I can see I've taken off maybe 1 millimeter from our incisal edge. My midline should be right here on about that right third of the tooth. Canines need to be widened out on both sides and brought up. All right. That gives me all the information I need now to go and do this in 3D. So that's what I would use this DTS Pro for. Now, another thing to mention is the facial scanner. So in this particular case, we use the Instarisa, which is a great facial scanner. We have actually 3 options for facial scanning. And the Instarisa is one that's great. It's got a nice software that is a little bit more geared towards dentistry, so it actually will prompt you, okay, do a facial scan smiling, do a facial scan at repose, do a facial scan with retractors in so that you can see the teeth really well for stitching in the STLs of the teeth. So I like this one a lot. A little pricier than the others, or well, than this one at least. This is another one that we use. This is the Einscan Pro from Shining 3D. Now this one is just an overall 3D scanner for larger objects in general. Okay, so I've used this to scan the dash of my ATV and make little, components, gun holders, things like that, right? But you can just as easily scan a face with it. Now, this is a cheaper scanner to purchase initially. The downside to that is that the software is not as optimized for dentistry, meaning that it's not going to prompt you to take all of those various scans. You'll just have to treat them as individual scans and then stitch them after the fact, which is not the end of the world, but it's not quite as streamlined. And then also you've got the cone beam that we have is I thought this video would play. Let's see if I can get it to play here. Well, for whatever reason, this is not playing, but what this was supposed to show is the facial scanner that's built into our Carestream 9600 cone beam. So with our clinic, knowing that we're doing all this digital stuff and lots of implant planning, we went all out, and I think the Carestream 9600 is one of the best scanners on the market. But a cool additional feature that it's got that you might use every day, regardless of whether you need a cone beam, is the facial scanner. So it does a quick and very efficient and accurate facial scan, and then you can use that in your treatment planning, right? And if you've also got the Carestream ecosystem of cone beam and intraoral scanners, which we have all those, it will also do the stitching of the models to the face, right? Very, very useful. And that's not a small detail. I know I've jumped from, $10,000 to $20,000 scanners up to 100 something thousand, but if you already need a cone beam and you're interested in this stuff, this should be a big value added thing that maybe kicks you towards that Carestream scanner, because that automatic stitching between all of these pieces of data is not a small task. It takes a decent amount of time to do that, so bear that in mind. And then before I actually show using that facial scan in Blue Sky, I'll just show the rest of her case, and then we'll be done in this little PowerPoint. We took her cone beam, right? We stitched this in. Then we took our intraoral scans. We stitched those in. Then we took that facial scan and pulled it in. And I'll show you how to do this. But what I find perhaps even more useful than the facial scan is these alignment planes that I bring in and align to the facial scan. Because now what's cool is I can turn that facial scan off, and I can essentially use this to know exactly where teeth need to be dropped. Okay, makes it very clean. So we'll go over how to do that. Notice that my planes, they're parallel to the allotragus here, right? So if I drop one of those that is parallel from the front to interpupillary, and it's parallel from the side to allotragus, that is my occlusal plane. Now I just need to know how far up or down do I drag this and drop teeth onto. And once you've got it positioned, your tooth setup should be mindless. Like, anyone should be able to do that. Very easy. And here's an example of that. I've turned the facial scan off. Again, remember where we said her midline was? Based on her facial midline, this is where it goes. So when I start doing her digital setup, I'm just dragging and dropping teeth where the midline is here and the occlusal plane sits here. And they're symmetric side to side. That's it. It's easy. And here you see me doing exactly that. I've pulled in the entire upper and lower dentition. I've dropped it onto this plane. And now, if anything needs to be done, all that will need to be done is perhaps widening the smile or the tooth setup to conform to her arches, right? It could be easier. So we'll show that in the software. And again, you see that translates to us capturing that new midline. It's just so much easier to reference all this stuff than to try and keep jumping back between the 2D pictures. Or God forbid you didn't even take 2D pictures. You are up a creek without a paddle. You have no idea. And it's going to be a guess at best. And probably going to take multiple tries. In the case of dentures, multiple try-ins. I mean, why do that? Why not just figure it out from the start? At a minimum, 2D pictures. And then additional information would be that course record, or kind of the whole shebang would be course record and facial scanner. If you screw it up with all that, I mean, I don't know what you're doing with your life, because it should be impossible to miss. Okay. Now the facial scans, now granted, I have the color skin turned off on this one, so it would look better if this was colorized. But to me, a lot of people love the facial scan to actually see the setup in the face. To me, it looks fake. I don't like it as much. I find the 2D to be better for that with the simulation. But again, what I'm primarily using it for is to know that my setup is aligned to the midline, interpupillary, allotragus, and maybe relative position to incisal edge of the lip, all of those things. That is where I find the most use in the facial scan. All right. And then again, here you see my setup with all this data aligned, intraoral scans and everything. You can see now my setup. I'm parallel to allotragus. So in her case, what we chose to do was a full mouth implant rehab. And so we did our implant planning, did bone segmentation, and we actually generated some magnetic guides, which our lab, makes. Now, I'll tell you that this is it was an early case where we were kind of prototyping our design on this and trying it out. So this was just in resin. We didn't bother with the metal printing. Now, when we do these, they're much thinner in profile. They're all metal, which I think makes for a much more stable and smaller guide that requires less reflection. But same principle either way. Flapping, and most of your flap reflection is just done on the buckle. This is a tooth guide that allows you to position your fixation base, drill your pinholes, and pin in your fixation base. And now this thing will just magnetically pop off and you can toss it. All right, so there's that seated. And now you would do bone reduction down to that level. And with bone reduction done, now you would drop in your magnetic drill guide. And this is to guide those blue sky fully guided keyless drills. Hence, we don't need the metal sleeves. All right. These black notches, those are all the timing marks. So my partner, Ben Kellum, is who did the surgery on this, did all the clinical steps, really. I was just the digital monkey doing some design behind that. But when he's placing these disto-angled implants, we know that he's got to align one of the flats on the driver to one of these black lines. And if he does that, then emergence positions will be perfect for an immediate load prosthesis. All right, just a little short video showing how these things pop in. So I think it's a really clean way of doing these cases. I don't have to pull any pins. I don't have to unfasten any components. It literally just pulls on or drops on. Very simple. And so here's the implants going in, and one of the things we found was she had super, super soft bone. We actually only, if I'm going by memory, but I believe we only had a 3.0 osteotomy and ended up with 5mm implants and still couldn't get primary fixation. Okay, so, we still guided them in, still got the positions right. And since we'd already made an immediate load prosthesis, we took a picture with it in, and hypothetically this would have aligned it to her facial planes and made the pickup really easy. You can see the contours are nice, ovate and convex, but alas, we didn't get primary fixation, so kind of had to scramble and figure out an alternative. So what Ben did is he went ahead and just closed up, and then since we had all of her digital data, we can just cut the teeth out of her intraoral scans, and we could now design some digital dentures. All right, so teeth belong where they belong, and once we've done that setup relative to her intraoral scans and the facial scan, then the difference in me doing, say, a wax up for crown and bridge versus a full arch wax up for an implant rehab or a digital denture, it's the same difference. It's just for the latter, I'll cut the teeth out of the intraoral scan. Okay, so we couldn't give her teeth that day. We scrambled, and I think Ben just quickly took that data and designed a set of digital dentures. In fact, I think this was the day of just the maxilla. We did the mandible at a later date, and we got her back the very next day and gave her this 3D printed denture. Now I'm going off memory. If I remember correctly, I think this is just a monolithic printed denture, I think in Flexera Smile, that we pinked. I could be wrong on that. It might even be a two-piece denture, pink and white, but not really relevant either way. But look at the difference here from where she started, okay? An absolute game changer for her. And I wanted to show just her videos, about 10 seconds, just of when she got it. She's been in this state with bad teeth for a long time, had lots of pain, problem, infections, and whatnot. So it really moved her to see these teeth in her face. That did the surgery, but you can see she's crying. I mean, that is a life-changing thing for this patient. So again, just going back to that very first slide where you could see the before and after side by side. I mean, that's a big deal. To go from here to here, and, you know, again, with all that she's gone through with the suffering of being made fun of and whatnot, this is just a huge, huge deal. And what I would point out is put aside all the implants and everything, right? That for sure ups the difficulty level. Think about you as just a general dentist. If you have the capability to deliver results like this, and essentially that would have been 2 appointments, right? We had just acquired data one day. When we figured out we couldn't immediate load, we just took that very data and then designed the digital denture and delivered it the next. There's no reason you couldn't maybe even do this in a single day, where the first time you see them is in the morning, and then you're giving them their dentures by after lunch. That is life-changing stuff to be able to do in a general dentist office. Um, you know, you've got complete control over the process. So if you need to hear a pitch for digital dentures, I don't think I need to say much more than the fact that you can consistently do complete dentures in 2 appointments where you knock it out of the park without needing try-ins and stuff. And a denture like what is being shown right here is maybe 10 millimeter or $10 in overhead. Okay, and the only technology you have to accomplish this is a scanner, and that could be intraoral or desktop. I kind of like a desktop for dentures, but you know, you can do it with either. So you need a scanner and a 3D printer. These are 3D printed dentures. The materials have finally caught up now to where they're almost as, they're about comparable now to a conventional PMMA processed denture. Okay, that's it. That's all you need. And then from a software perspective, you need Blue Sky Plan, which is free to download, and you're only charged basically a per feed case on your exports. So hypothetically, let's say we did an upper and a lower denture. That's going to cost me one export at 20 bucks. All right. And then just to use round numbers, let's say that each denture cost me $10. All right. So $40 to do this and 2 appointments, 2 quick appointments, I'll add. I mean, what else do I need to say to to get you to buy into this digital denture stuff? Like, that to me is a no-brainer. Is there a learning curve? Yeah, there's a learning curve with everything in dentistry, period. So I've seen, you know, lots of doctors that were not that tech savvy grasp this process and go on to do this. So it's not rocket science. So just to wrap up today, let's go into the Blue Sky Plan file and show you how I did a few of these things. So I'm going to open up her case. And before I even do that, here's what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up this facial scan in Mesh Mixer. This was the wrong program. All right. Let's open Mesh Mixer. And what I'm going to do is just drag in that facial scan. All right. Let me go ahead and OK this so it'll go ahead and be opening in the background. All right, back here, let's import now. So normally I would do this after I've aligned. It just so happens I've already got a facial scan here that I aligned to my cone beam data in Blue Sky. So take that for what it's worth. But this was the facial scan. Now, for some reason, when I downloaded this, I apparently didn't download the color along with it. But normally this is, again, going to be photorealistic. But I'm not so much even worried about that. Really, what I want to use this for is to figure out these facial planes. So the way I do that, under Mesh Mix, I'm going to grab just a cube, and I'm going to pull that in, and then I can size this down to, I'll make this 0.5 millimeters thick. And then I'm just going to pull this in and manually align it to her interpupillary line. Alright, so since she is closing her eyes, sometimes these facial scanners give you a dadgum seizure while you're scanning, because it's a lot of bright light. So I might just use like the canthus of her eye as my gauge. And now I can pull that down, making sure I'm symmetric. Appears that I am. And I'd like to kind of maybe align this in this direction where it's more or less in the middle. Alright, so that is one plane. I can just as easily now duplicate that and hit T for transform, and what if we rotated that 90 degrees? Alright, I can change the angle to 90. And then I can pull this down, and let's bring it over until we can match the midline of the face. Alright, these can be pulled in whatever direction you want. I do try, if I can, to keep these things perpendicular to one another. Now, sometimes your patient will have some facial asymmetry, and in that case, that's fine. You can deviate from that if you need to. But what I'm gauging for the facial midline is right through the middle of the bridge of their nose. And then my second alignment point is that philtrum of the upper lip. If I can pass through both of those, I'm going to consider that the facial midline. And virtually everyone, you're going to see if you ever do this, even in 2D pictures, everyone's got facial asymmetry, right? It's just part of it. If facial symmetry is one of the key components of beauty, that may be why there's so few people out there that are just truly, truly considered absolutely beautiful, because facial symmetry is pretty rare. You know, most of us don't ever notice it. I've got horrible facial asymmetry. That's why I'm so ugly. But in any case, this is a facial midline. We'll use that. And then what if I wanted an additional plane that I can set teeth to? Okay, well, I could do one of two things. I could push transform, and as long as I've already aligned here, I could just pull it down. Or I could just duplicate it and put another here. Okay, now I did remember one thing. I'm going to cancel that real quick, because even though I'm parallel to the interpupillary line, I need to verify that I'm also parallel to the allotragus from the lateral view. And I see that I am not right here. So I'm going to tweak this now. Alright, I'm not touching rotation in this direction, because that would screw up my interpupillary. I'm only changing the orientation in this plane, and from that it looks like I need to come up to right there. Alright, tragus of the ear right on the tip of it to the ala of the nose. Alright, that is now my that's going to be parallel to the occlusal plane. Okay, parallel to the pupils here, parallel to allotragus here. And that should be symmetric side to side as well. If it's not, tweak it. In fact, that's another plane of reference that you could potentially use, is don't even necessarily gauge it off of the pupils. You could just do tragus of the ear, and that would get you a good alignment. Alright, so there's that plane. I'm going to scoot it back up here towards the pupils. And then let's just duplicate it. Edit, duplicate, and then T for transform. This one, now, you could just pull one down in this neighborhood just as a reference, but what I like to do is, if I've got any references of maybe where teeth currently are, what I want to do is basically put this to right where I would set the incisal edge of the new teeth. So think back to our simulation, right? We said here is her existing incisal edge, and if we wanted to achieve that simulation, then we would need to take that edge from right here to right there. So let's just do that. Okay, if I zoom in here, even though this is not the highest quality mesh, you can definitely make out that incisal edge, and we said we wanted to bring that up about like so. Alright, if I've done that correctly, and I'm parallel to interpupillary, and I'm parallel to allotragus, I don't really even need to think about where those canines were or any of that, because now I'm just going to bring in my teeth and drop them right on this flat plane. Okay, very simple. So currently, this facial alignment set is 3 individual STLs. I would suggest you control select all of them and just combine them. And now I export that, and I'll call this facial planes. And you know what, I don't know where I just saved that. Yeah, I need to change that. So let's just call this facial planes. And now I'm going to show you how I would use that in Blue Sky. Alright. Now this is a final case file, so I'm going to get rid of a bunch of these things. I had done this all already prior to that computer dying, but so be it. Don't need any guides. We'll start over on the wax up so you can see that. Alright, so I'm not even going to get into the implant planning. I'm using this as a reference for setting teeth. And frankly, I don't even start planning implants until I do know where teeth belong. Alright, now bear in mind, she was taken, if we went back and did this again, you really should be cone beam scanning patients for full mouths in occlusion at the correct VDO. Alright, now she was a little collapsed. I would have just used a leaf gauge and opened her to the right facial proportions, and then holding her in that position in occlusion, I would have taken the cone beam there. And the reason for that is here you can see she was taken in an open bite. 2 sets of all my STLs, because this is not how her maximum intercuspation is. So I would have one set of STLs that I would align to the DICOM data. Then I'd bring in maybe another lower intraoral scan that is aligned in occlusion to this upper. It makes for a lot of extra work to have those duplicate files. So since I'm not doing that today, I'm just going to do this on the maxillary arch only with disregard for the mandible. That can be a video for another day. Alright, let's pull in now those facial scans and that alignment planes. So first of all, let's get this facial scan, which I've already aligned. I don't need to stitch that. Again, I'm missing the color here, but normally you would have the color. And then here's the facial planes I just generated. Don't need to align them. Okay, so all that stuff that we just talked about, we now have as a reference for setting these teeth up. So at this point, I don't even need those teeth. I could just use this. Now what I'll do is turn the transparency up on those facial planes, and I'm going to just hide the mandible for right now. So let's go down to do her digital wax up. I'm going to go to denture module. And now I just need to pick the appropriate tooth library, and that could be any one of several libraries. It's just what you think would look the best. Let's maybe say the Christian Brennis's oval teeth library. Alright? And since this is going to be an upper and a lower case, I'll bring in the entire dentition. So select all the teeth. Only I'm going to leave out second molars, because again, this was an implant rehab. We're not going to put second molars on an immediate load prosthesis. So you just shift, drop that into place. Now you're going to see why this is so valuable. You know, I can almost do this entire setup with complete disregard for where her STLs even are. You know, I could line these up symmetrically. I could position the midline going right through the middle of that. I could let's see, I need to bring this slightly over. Up there. Okay, now we're aligned to facial midline. Now I need to look from the front and twist this a little bit. You see how these teeth are hanging down more? So I'm going to twist that up until we're symmetric. Then I need to look from this direction. Remember, we just established this plane right here is parallel to allotragus and interpupillary. So that tells me I need to twist this down to maybe there, and then pull it back. So honestly, about the only thing I need to reference is how far should that incisal edge be. Okay, and we had said we might consider bringing it back just a little bit, not that much. So right there. And I went a little long with it, so I'm going to go back up slightly. Also see that I need to rotate those posteriors down a little bit more to be closer to the table. Okay. So in reference to her existing teeth, you can see I've brought these new proposed teeth back maybe 1 millimeter or 2 at most. I'm just a hair shorter than what it was originally. Right there. Okay. And then the only other thing I would need to use this existing model for, I'm done with the facial planes now, is to now conform this to her overall arch form. Alright, so some of these libraries may be very oval shaped or U-shaped arches, whereas others might be very constricted V-shaped arches. I can fix that by going to show and hide the tooth chain. Utilizing the tooth chain now, for example, as I'm looking at this, I can see that this is a much broader library than what her natural dentition are. Oh, and I did forget one other thing I need to do is the scaling of her teeth. Although I'm looking and these are pretty good. So if I wanted to, back while we had this move entire tooth chain, I could scale these up or down. Let's just align this to where her premolar here coincides on both. Alright, I could pull this maybe back again just a bit since I expanded it out. There we go. Alright, so now we've got appropriate scaling, but obviously we need to pull these back to conform them to her arch more. So now I'll turn back on the tooth chain. Let's maybe lock that. This side of the dentition needs to come back more than the other. So if I lock that central, and if I keep the opposing occlusion and move the opposing teeth, then now what I can do is just hold shift, and I'm going to grab the tooth just distal to where I locked. Okay, so looking from this direction now, I'm going to hold shift, click that central, and I'm going to pull back. Now this tool is touchy, so you gotta be very light touch with that. Alright, still need to come back some more, but rather than doing it all from the central, I might opt to now rotate from here and just gradually kind of start bringing things back. And see, there's an example. I went too far. So let's Control Z that. Control Z. And let's try to do it just a little bit. Okay. And then this side needs to be brought in just a little bit too, so same thing. I'm going to lock it at the actually here I'm going to lock it at the lateral, and just grab the canine and bring it inward just a hair. It's got a really narrow arch here. Going back to Mesh Mixer, the one other thing you could have done here is for your scaling of the teeth, if you don't want to ballpark it, then while this is still separate, edit, duplicate, T for transform, pull one over this way, width of the nose, accept that, duplicate another, T, width of the nose. Alright, and I really probably should have done that, but now when you're dropping this thing in, you're scaling that you're trying to scale canine to canine to fit right here. Alright, so anyway, this is basically it. And since I covered digital dentures, I think several weeks in a row, I'm not going to just go through and design the digital denture, but essentially all I'd have to do is now cut the teeth off of her maxillary cast, re-import that, and then make the denture on that cast, but with this tooth set up. Alright, that's it. So if you, granted I know with what I'm showing today, you need a facial scanner, or you need to utilize the pictures. Now anyone can do the pictures. Yes, the facial scan is going to cost money, but again, I think it's a really valuable tool. How do you screw it up? If you've got that, you can just see everything that you need to see. Let's turn that back on, and now you can kind of see this in her face. Not the most realistic, again, that's why I don't put too much weight on this aspect of it, because it just doesn't look realistic to me, even with the color on it. I don't know, maybe I'm just weird. You could also duplicate this facial scan and then have a second one of them that you've cut all those teeth out of. Let's do that real quick. Alright, we've got this facial scan. We could now use the cut tool and just cut these teeth out. There we go. Now you got your teeth, okay? And we could further tweak it and do all that stuff. Again, look, wet dry line of the lip. How are we doing? There's going to be the wet dry line of the lip. We're right under it. That's going to be good. So again, I just think this is so valuable to have. Let's look at the overall width. Even though I didn't bring in those planes, I can see distal of that canine, distal of this canine. If anything, if I went back and tweaked this, I might widen back out this side of the arch a little bit, because it looks like I went overboard. Yeah, that's not as symmetric, but that's all things that you could tweak as you go along. So hopefully you found this useful. Those are just some of the tools that I utilize to help myself in doing smile design for dentures, wax ups, crown and bridge rehabs, implant rehabs, all of that stuff. To me, it starts with the picture of the face, then a simulation, then a 3D wax up, and the facial scan just adds that much more information to the process so that you can really knock it out of the park. So anyways, this is something any dentist can do with or without the facial scanner and can consistently get results like this. And man, if you've got the power to do that in your office, you now have the ability to do some life-changing work that you can do as a charitable type thing like we did here. We didn't charge anything for this because it's, the only cost we really had was a little bit of resin, and then the export and the implants, which Blue Sky Bio was very gracious to donate. They are excellent about helping with charitable type things, so very grateful to them. But again, life-changing dentistry that anyone can learn to do. But it takes a little shine off if you've got to do let's say if you wanted to do a charity case for this patient. Now you're looking, if you do it old school, at 5 appointments, big lab bill, probably $200 to $300 per arch. It's much harder to offer charitable dentistry doing that. Whereas here, hey, it's just my time, and I'm happy to invest my time. a little harder to part with lab bills on charitable cases like that. So in any case, I hope you found that useful. We'll be back next week with another Facebook Live covering something. I don't know what. And hopefully I'll get to see a few of you at the digital denture course, either in person or virtually. So I hope you have a great day. See ya.